Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 327, and today's guest is Reed Sturtevant, general partner at Engine Ventures. Well, this is exciting. Why, you may ask? Well, it's because this episode is longer than my normal interviews, as Reed and I cover his career that spans multiple decades across major technological platform shifts. This means that based on his career, he has so many great stories to share. It's like a historical walkthrough of the Boston tech scene. We even had to do 2 sessions, so if you're watching this video from YouTube, then you'll notice the different sweaters that he is wearing. Today, Reed is a general partner at Engine Ventures, a tough tech venture capital firm launched by MIT. And just trust me on this one, you'll want to stay tuned throughout the whole episode because we cover so much. Here is a general outline of what we cover. Reed's background story, including graduating from high school at 15 years old, his experience as a factory worker, and his studies at MIT, developing a program called Freelance Graphics at a startup that was acquired by Lotus, and his experience there, which was twice the size of Microsoft at the time, co-founding RadNet, which raised the largest venture round of its time in Boston, running company development in Boston for Idealab, Bill Gross's internet incubator, which spun out companies like Compete, Picasa, and others, meeting Katie Ray at Eons, a startup founded by Jeff Taylor, and then running Microsoft Startup Labs, launching Project 11 Ventures with Katie, and then running Techstars Boston together, which included many successful companies like GrabCAD, PillPack, and others, founder conflict and how it can destroy a startup, the details of Engine Ventures and what Reed is targeting for investments, plus portfolio company examples, what it was like leading a course at MIT with Sir Tim Berners-Lee, and so much more. Okay, quick side note. This week's episode is sponsored by MarketMuse, a content intelligence platform that sets the standard for content quality. Their AI-powered software enables companies to create predictably better content at scale that increases traffic and engagement, improves productivity, and drives revenue. Get more out of your content with packages starting at $0 a month. That's free. Plus, you can get 20% off the MarketMuse standard plan by using our code FIZZ20, that's FIZZ20, at checkout. Go to marketmuse.com to get started. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Reed. Reed, thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, Keith. This is going to be fun. It's
oh
really
my God.
Yeah.
So much fun. I was so excited to run into you at the Nevy Awards, and I'm like, oh, we have to do the podcast because your background story and the companies that you've been a part of and what you're doing now with Engine Ventures, it's just so much goodness that we can get out of this podcast. It's one of those that could probably be an extended version of
Yep.
what we need to talk about. But before we get into your background story, I did want to talk to you about tech trends and kind of like looking out in the future, because what you see at Engine Ventures, I think compared to other VCs, what they see, it must be really, really fascinating. So I just want to talk to you about what are you foreseeing kind of like the future? Like everyone's talking about AI. So obviously that's part of the Wild West, as Salesforce is talking like, oh, if the Wild West is AI, data is the gold. I think that ad is pretty funny. But anyways,
Yeah.
what are you seeing out there? What are the tech trends that you're kind of excited about?
Yeah, sure. So, you're right. We do see a crazy amount of stuff that's almost like science fiction. And we also work to get into kind of early trends in different labs and universities. So general trends that I personally find fascinating right now, there's a whole bunch of continuing work on quantum computing and quantum sensing that will pay off big dividends in the long run. So there's a couple teams that we've worked with in those areas, and we've looked at maybe a dozen different startups. There's a really big trend, which is modeling and simulation of physical processes in software. There's some really interesting work going on that we keep bumping into, where people are using very compute-intensive modeling and then training AI against that data to do very efficient predictions of different, physics and thermal effects and fluid dynamics. And then I personally work with 3 different semiconductor companies and keep running into more and more either specialized compute for AI, trying to different approaches to continue, sort of breaking through the flattening of Moore's law, photonics. So there's a whole bunch of sort of esoteric physics-based stuff, but every every pitch, the first meeting is almost like a graduate seminar. And we're like, slow down. You're going to do what? You're going to take a brain out of a dead, pig, for instance, and you're going to bring it back to cellular life and keep it running for days or weeks. Really?
Oh
and so
man, that's
there's
so
like,
cool.
and there's really a huge amount of, I don't know how to say it, but it's kind of like if the problems in the world today, if you had a time machine and you could go back 20 years and make changes or get things started, in some ways that's what we are today, is like we can put things into, help things get in motion that will pay off 20 years from now. So it's kind of like this weird, fascinating obligation is kind of to make the right choices.
So cool, so cool. So we'll talk more about the engine or engine ventures in a bit here, but let's talk about you. So what's your background story? Like, where'd you grow up? What were you like as a
Yeah.
child?
Yeah, I grew up in Chevy Chase, Maryland. My dad worked at the Smithsonian his whole career, kind of an academic type of job. My mom was a homemaker, but she also my grandfather, my mother's side, was Prime Minister of Burma for a while during World War II, and then so she had a very political life and connection back into Burma as I was growing up. Got out of high school super early, got out at 15, was accepted at MIT, decided, I'm not going to come up to MIT when I'm 15 years old. So took a gap year and then it came up to Boston quite a while ago.
That is great. I knew you were smart, but I didn't know you were that smart, right? Like wow, okay. And then like I saw on Twitter or X as we call it now, I guess,
Yeah.
there was a telegram from Oppenheimer. So there was like I'm like, wait, what? Like this is what I love like doing this podcast because then I just like go deep on somebody and I just find these pieces of information, these little nuggets of gold. I'm just like, how is there a connection there with Reed's
Yeah.
family?
So I dug that up. I'm an atomic history buff. I've been out to visit the Trinity site where they set off the first atomic bomb, and I found that telegram in a box of papers that my family had saved, and I love it because it's just a simple telegram, and it says, "Distressed to find that we cannot come to dinner Friday, Oppenheimer." And
Hopefully they got it in time.
yeah, they got it in time. Um, just even the funny fact that people used to send telegrams about, can I come over on Friday? The Apparently, from what I could tell, is my father's father was a professor at Caltech, and became friendly with other scientists. Oppenheimer was there for a while, Linus Pauling, so there was a connection to the family for that. And my father was an anthropologist, and there was a famous anthropologist coming to visit DC, Claude Lévi-Strauss. And my mom was throwing a giant dinner party. I was probably 6 years old. I can still remember. She set up tables in the front lawn, little tiny house. Had like 100 people come over for dinner to meet Claude Lévi-Strauss, and had invited the Oppenheimers.
That's so cool. Okay, so starting your career, like you didn't start out in software. You actually had a little stint before that, right?
Well, yeah, my first full-time job, I dropped out of MIT after one semester. I then went back and then dropped out a second time for good. But when I dropped out the first time, my family quite reasonably was like, hey, we're paying your way while you're in school, but if you're not in school, you might try to figure out how to cover your own,
Makes
expenses.
sense. Yep.
So I had no skills, I think I turned 17. I got a job at a factory in Fields Corner, Dorchester, where they made embroidered patches, and I was just a regular, like do anything kind of factory worker as my first full-time job in Boston.
Love that. That's grit right there. That's grit.
Yeah.
All right. So how did you get your career started in the world of software and tech?
Yeah, so when I after the factory work, I went back for a semester and a half to MIT, and then finally decided, what, this is not for me. So I had been working at night as kind of a computer operator, if you will, running back then time sharing. It's like cloud computing, but renting time on a computer was cheaper by the hour at night. So this was a nonprofit that would hire MIT students to come in and run the programs at night and fix things that weren't working. So when I dropped out, I asked that company, Strategic Planning Institute, I said, hey, would you take me on full time? and they hired me in. I'd taken a couple programming classes at MIT, and I learned to be a professional programmer on the job there.
And from this, and within that company, you actually created like the best-selling graphics app for personal computers, Freelance Graphics 1.0.
Yeah, it's actually was the next company. So someone that worked there reached out and said, "Hey, we're starting a company now that it's sort of the early days. It was before the IBM PC." He said, "We're going to write software to make charts and graphs." And I had been doing that within the Strategic Planning Institute. I'd kind of we had we had a graphic arts department that would do typesetting and layout for all these reports that they were generating. And I bought some CAD/CAM engineering software and hardware, and it was just sitting around. Nobody could, and I said, "Hey, if I finish my work, quickly, will you let me set that up and get it going?" So I learned computer graphics and programming at SPI, and then was recruited out to a startup called Graphic Communications Inc.,
Got it.
where
Okay.
we wrote a whole bunch of custom software that we would initially sell it as you'd buy a little HP lab computer, a pen plotter, and our software, you type in all of the data, and we'd use the pen plotter to make bar charts or pie charts on transparencies, like for an overhead projector. And then when the IBM PC came out, we developed, our product was called Graph Writer, and it was charts and graphs, and we developed that for the IBM PC. We're selling it as a software package. Some months we were number one in the market, and some months we were number three in the market. And I kept saying, "Hey, we should do a different kind of product, more presentation focused, more freeform." And so that I was the senior engineer. I wasn't one of the founders. But finally, the founding founder said, "Hey, Reed, you're talking about this all the time. Why don't you just take a couple of weeks, write it up? What would the menus look like? What would the functions be?" This was freelance. And then they were like, "Okay, why
Were you
don't you
writing
and
this
Bob?"
in BASIC or what? Like, what was the
This was
language?
in C at that
C.
time.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. The first product was BASIC. Then we had a Pascal version, and then we moved over to C when the IBM PC came out. And they said, "Why don't you and Bob and Holly take a couple months, try to finish a prototype, the idea seems good, but can you really make it work?" The hardware was super limited back at that time. So we came back, we had a prototype. You could drag things around on the screen, sort of do freeform drawing and editing of all, import charts that we had made with our Graph Writer product. And they said, "Okay, why don't you take the whole engineering team and do a bet the company project? Just you have to get it done by October for the annual trade show Comdex." So the whole engineering team was maybe 10 people. We were a small company, maybe a $4 million annual revenue run rate at that point. And so we got it done. I mean, it was a slog to sort of get it finished and working. I remember we had a sort of the worst part was they added me to the management committee. We'd meet at 7 a.m. on Monday mornings, which for a programmer was not the best idea. And before we launched the product, they were like, "Hey, maybe we should really do a push on publicity to kind of make a big splash." And they said, "Why don't we run for the 3 weeks in front of the trade show, a set of mysterious double page ads in PC Week, it's magazine, trade magazine."
Okay.
And they were like, "Well, how much would that cost?" $50,000. Well, how much money do we have in the
$50,000.
bank? Yeah, we got 150,000 in the bank. So it's kind of like this, like, wow, is this how people make decisions in business? Long story short, it was freelance graphics was a huge hit when it came out. And within 6 months, our company was acquired by Lotus Development. The
And
makers of
how was the product sold? Was it sold through, what was the store? Computer World? What was
Yeah, it
through
was
those types
all
of stores?
either retail, like Computer World, or it was we would sell into distributors like
Mm,
Ingram and I forget the names of the distributors. So it was called what you would call stuffing the channel. So you would try to push product into the distributors, and they would resell either to enterprise customers or to retail distribution.
got it. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So 6 months later, acquired by Lotus, which
Yep.
Lotus is this massive software company that is, part of the fabric of back then and today, even today's DNA of the tech industry in Boston.
in Boston. Yeah, we were Lotus was 1,200 employees. This was 86, and they were twice the size of Microsoft. Microsoft was 600 employees. It was a
Wow.
public company that at the time they were well known for being progressive. They were for quite a while. They held the record for highest first year annual sales of any U.S. company. The first year they launched, they had 53 million in annual revenue, which
Wow.
in
And was that one, two,
adjusted for
three?
inflation, yeah, 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
And they
Okay.
that adjusted for inflation, they'd be about double that, roughly if you think of 86 to today. And we had worked with Microsoft. They had hired graphic communications. We designed and wrote the Windows GDI, the graphics device interface, and we wrote the first 10 device drivers for Microsoft on contract. But yeah, it was a wild run. And then freelance graphics, my product, we grew that in 6 years to $100 million annual revenue, which again would be about 200 million in today's numbers, which was really, really fascinating. I wound up running the engineering team instead of just being a developer, and we did, I would guess, 20 different releases. We did an OS2 version, we did a Windows version. We kind of localized it into Japanese. Kind of Lotus had a global footprint, and it was really a marketing machine.
Wow. That's hitting the ball out of the park, kind of like one of your first swings there. That's amazing.
It was fun. It was really, really fun.
All right. So at Lotus, the world is starting to change. The next wave of technology is happening, the internet. So what
Yeah.
so what's it like at Lotus during that stretch where disruption is happening and everyone knows it's coming, yet what are we supposed to do about it? Kind of like now with AI, people are like, we got to talk about AI, but what are we supposed to do with it?
Yeah, it was the big up and coming product at the time within Lotus was Lotus Notes, which was a networked groupware, collaboration, email, and document management and workflow. In the early days of the web, I used to eat lunch at a lunch table with a bunch of folks who not in my team, but I just got to know them, and they were part of this Boston kind of white hat hacking group called the Loft, and they knew all about the internet and TCP/IP, and I was like a sponge, kind of learning about all this stuff. And in '93, the early Windows web browsers, Mosaic, came out, and we were like, this is going to steamroll everything. The World Wide Web is just it's a phenomenon. It's like this weird combination of every now and then there's a moment like the Bitcoin white paper, or people realize with Chat GPT, oh my God, so the web, if you actually used it back in '93, it was just mind blowing. And if you were an engineer and you kind of understood the protocols and how flexible they were, Lotus as a company, big public company coming up on $1 billion a year in sales, they had a network service called AT&T Network Notes, which is sort of a cloud service hosted and managed by AT&T for your notes applications that you needed to access from different locations. So they called it the business internet. And as the engineers, we were like, that is not the internet. So I was part of, at the time, I was chair of what they call the Architects Council. We had monthly meetings. So we we installed, we got internet dial-up accounts for all of the key CEO and all of the key senior vice presidents. We installed browsers and kind of showed it to them. And then we held a meeting, Paul Haverstock, a friend at Lotus, and I kind of designed a super demo of the web and showed people what you could actually do with it and how it worked at this Architects Council monthly meeting. There were two senior vice presidents of engineering, John Landry and June Rokoff at the time. And I forget who, but one of them said, this is it's all free software. There's no money in this. And this was the web. And then the other said, kind of reminds me of CB radio. Maybe this is just kind of like a fad that's going to, flash in the pan. So it was rough, but we got permission to, we actually had to have a meeting with Ray Ozzie, the inventor of Notes, and kind of get permission to to build a web product. And so the idea was you could use Lotus Notes to collect information, but you could publish it out on a website automatically. And so we got permission, said, okay, you can take 6 people, you just have to cover your own, essentially your burn rate by the end of the year, first year. We built a plugin to Lotus Notes that converted documents to HTML. We went through the pricing committee, kind of trained the sales force, did a kind of like executive briefing tour around the world, because the web was super hot. This was in '94. We had $1 million worth of sales by the end of the first year. So we kind of covered our own expenses. And that initial product called Internotes Web Publisher later was rebranded as Domino and kind of became the brand for the Lotus Notes server. So it was a fascinating experiment to kind of turn the ship at a really big company.
And this is all around the same time like Mosaic was coming out too, right?
Yeah. Mosaic was coming out. Netscape had been formed in '94. There was a moment when I was, setting up a demo at a trade show called PC Forum, and the Netscape folks were using our demo room for a meeting during, and I was like, had to kick them out because I had to set up a demo.
You kicked Mark Andreesen out?
Yeah. Guys, I got to get the demo set up for the break.
That's awesome. So you talked about the loft. So wait, so that was like Chris Wysopal, like Veracode,
he was the guy at the lunch table. Yeah, Chris Wysopal. And when we started, well, we'll get to that part of my story, but when I started, he was the first hire at a company that we started called RadNet.
Perfect segue. So let's talk about leaving the comforts of Lotus, right? This massive software company, and then starting something new.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Lotus was bought by IBM in a hostile takeover in 1995, and as a side effect of that, the transaction forward vested everybody's stock options. So 95, I don't forget how old I was, but so that was quite a while ago. So it was still the era where you would get even if you had direct deposit, you get paper pay stubs. And I remember going to my little mailbox, and it's like, why do I have this stack of pay stubs? And then the guy in the next office, Dennis Cunningham, he came out of his office, I came out of mine, and he was holding a stack, and he's like, what are these things? And then we went back, and I was like, yeah, I got 6 of them, and he's like, yeah, I got 8 of them, and we go back in our offices. Then he comes over sheepishly and saying, I wasn't trying to brag. I didn't know what they were. I didn't know either. Who cares? And they were the payroll system couldn't print a single check above $99,999. And so, if you had $600,000 worth of stock options, you got like 6 checks. So I decided that I had learned a lot about the web, and I had raised my hand for our product and said, let me be the marketing and product management person. So I'd also learned a lot about how to talk to analysts and large customers and kind of the whole product marketing side of things. And I, we had as my family, we had a financial cushion where I could take a risk. We could pay our mortgage for a few years if we had to. If things didn't work out. So with a friend and his wife, we decided to start a company based on kind of a knockoff of Notes, but using a web browser as a client and using a standard SQL database as the back end of the server. So that was a company called RadNet, for Reed, Andrew, and Darlene, the 3 initials.
Got it. Okay. Now it makes sense. Yeah. Like I remember RadNet when I started recruiting in '98. It was called Seek Consulting at the time, but it turned into Darwin Partners. And that was one of their customers. They were helping RadNet, I think, hire professional services folks. If I remember correctly, that was at least what the bread and butter of the searches they were doing at that point in time. So
I might have been the client because I rotated through a whole bunch of roles, but one of them was like, "Hey, Reed, why don't you stand up we want to build out a small professional services team of 10 or 12 people." So I had to go find a bunch of folks. That would be funny if we actually crossed paths back then without knowing it.
So funny. So funny. Yeah. All right. So, well, this company went on to raise capital and
Yeah, we had an interesting run. We raised $48 million commitment from Warburg Pincus Ventures in New York. And there was a headline in the Boston Globe said, RadNet raises record venture round. It was the largest venture capital round in Boston history at that time,
wow.
which is
Okay.
kind of funny to me now because, one of the portfolio companies that we work with at Engine Ventures, Commonwealth Fusion Systems, had the same headline a few years ago, except their round was $1.8 billion.
Right. Exactly. It's so cool. So the product you were working on, like, was it like, what would that be similar to like today's tech? Like
Yeah, the first product called WebShare it's really like an application development environment. So you might think of it as that we had an integrated development environment, and then we had a server that would kind of run these applications on for a work group. So it's almost like a low code app developer that could be used for custom sort of small business workflows. Like, oh, you want to build a custom invoice management or business intelligence reporting system, or kind of review and approval for internal purchasing, sort of these kind of business process, simple forms-based applications. The lesson learned there is we having the ability to raise money is sometimes not great. Because we were able to raise money, we hired a bunch of really good executives, some out of Lotus. And we were like, okay, let's do things. We want to move quickly, so let's do things in parallel. Let's finish the product. Let's build a VAR channel. Go out and find these web development shops and train them on our. We built a whole training program and documentation, and we recruited literally 200 channel partners who would do custom development using our WebShare tool. That work was totally wasted because the product, we never got product market fit for that product.
got it.
And so we burned through a whole bunch of capital. Then we kind of did a big pivot, and we had a more kind of professional services friendly product. And then we started getting traction. We had big customers paying us a few $1 million a year each, like Sun Microsystems, Lucent, IBM. But the company just kind of ran out of running room. We were trying to raise kind of the final mezzanine round. I had actually stepped out of the company. I was CTO, but it kind of got boring after 4 or 5 years. I would be putting on a suit and going down to New York and trying to convince people that our product fit their technical strategy, so I had stepped out, but I was still on the board, and we just hit a wall where we couldn't raise a final round of money. We were negotiating acquisition from two competing offers from public companies, and then there was a whole NASDAQ meltdown where the two possible acquirers both lost, like 30% market cap in a single week, and just stepped back. So that was not a positive outcome. We sold off the code base and moved a bunch of engineers to one company, and placed the paying customers with another company that was in the services business. So we kind of found a home for a bunch of people and for the customers, but it wasn't a financial win at that time.
All right. So we've covered a lot. There's so many great stories that need to be told of your career, yet we still have a lot to talk about, but there's still some stops on your journey that I don't want to forget. So Radio Amp, from what I gathered, was like an early version of Spotify, right? So we're gonna do like a lightning round and some of these next steps before we get into some of the longer term stuff.
Yeah, Radio Amp was a streaming audio service that we built in the late 90s, and it was we designed radio channels, and then we launched a web radio player where you could listen to the songs, and then you could click through to buy a CD. So we did partnerships with portals and partnerships with e-commerce sites in kind of a combination.
Yeah, so we could do a whole podcast about that alone because it's, you couldn't build that easily back then. It
Yeah,
sounds so, oh yeah, you did that. But back then it was like impossible to build,
right.
very complex, and how the web was operating then. Okay, then Idea Lab with Bill Gross, right? Like, so that,
Yeah,
obviously somebody who's very influential today and obviously in the early days of the web. So you helped launch the Boston office, if I'm
that's right.
correct?
I was recruited in. The headquarters are in Pasadena, and they were expanding out rapidly to Silicon Valley, London, New York, and Boston. And I was recruited. I knew Bill and his brother from the past, and they asked me to join and run the product and engineering team in Boston.
Yeah, so there was a number of different companies that came out of that. One that, definitely, I mean, Picasso was one, but another
Yep.
one that stood out is Compete, which
Yeah.
is a company that had great success in Boston.
Yeah, yeah, it was a really early web analytics company, and it was eventually, we built it out. We sold it to a European media firm, and that actually the first employee that we hired in was David Cancel. So another great
Yeah, amazing.
Boston guy. He ran the engineering side of that.
And see, so that's where I love this podcast because it's like I didn't know that was an Idea Lab company. So that's
Hmm.
so cool.
Yeah.
All right, next up is working with another famous entrepreneur, Jeff Taylor, who built Monster. He went on to do Eons.
Yeah, yeah, that was sort of serendipitous. Idea Lab, the last year, was commuting to LA and decided I wasn't gonna, our family wasn't gonna move out there. So I came back to Boston. I was kicking around on some projects, and a friend I knew had worked with Jeff and said, "Hey, he's starting another company." He had started Monster.com, and this was his kind of second go round. And he said he's looking to talk to someone about how search engines work. And I had done some search engine work at Idea Lab, so went over. He was just himself and an assistant in Charlestown in the Navy Yard with a concept for the company Eons. We really hit it off, and at the end of the afternoon, he asked me to consider coming in as CTO. So I joined Eons from the very beginning to build the engineering and tech side of the shop.
And is that where you met Katie Ray?
That is. She came in. Her youngest child at the time was probably 6 months old, and she came in part-time to help out with product. And eventually, Katie wound up running the product organization. I was running the tech organization, and we really worked well together. So yeah, we worked together now nonstop for coming up on 19 years.
That's awesome. All right, so for context, we're probably around like a 2007-ish era now. So one of the
That's right.
things that was super important during this time frame was Microsoft launched this office called the NERD, the New England Research and Development Center, I think was the acronym.
Yeah.
And like you were managing director for their startup labs, which was another like really like an anchor for the tech ecosystem that kind of was like this resurgence of startup activity.
Yeah, I was recruited. I had met Ray Ozzie, who was at Microsoft at the time, went back way back when he was doing Lotus Notes. And he recruited me to come and build an internal, almost like an Idea Lab style prototyping team, where we would develop consumer-facing concepts for potential Microsoft services and actually build the products, test them, bring some of them online. And we had a second order ask from Ray to try to. Microsoft at the time was known locally as kind of the evil empire, and he wanted us to try to kind of rehabilitate the reputation. And we again, I convinced Katie to come along. We put that organization together. We built out new office space at One Memorial Drive for our group, the Startup Labs, and we kind of did this hack where we designed open plan office space with half of the space set up so that at night we could use it as an event space. And kind of giant staircase that you could sit on, and audio and projection facilities. You could fit a couple hundred people in there, and we started letting tech organizations and groups ask to use it for free. And we didn't really run our own events there, but we're just basically became incredibly generous to picking and choosing which parts of the startup scene or the tech scene we wanted to kind of mash together. Within the first few months we were open with a new space, we probably had 4,000 people come through, and it totally tipped Google also had a big facility, still does in Kendall. And the Microsoft facility was very, very open and became a kind of a warm meeting place. The Google facility is one of those early ones where you go in when you had to check in and sign a non-disclosure agreement, even to go in for a meeting. So it flipped the reputation of Microsoft to be kind of very tech friendly and startup friendly back in the day.
Yeah, and that was so key. Like I went to many events and I hosted VentureFizz events there. It was fantastic because we needed a place to host events. I mean, it was just very difficult. I think we need another nerd right now.
Yeah.
All right, Techstars.
Yeah.
Uh, so Y Combinator started in Cambridge officially.
Right.
Like the very first class was in Cambridge, and they were running dual classes between West Coast, East Coast, and then obviously they settled on West Coast.
Yeah.
Um, that meant this great accelerator no longer was supporting kind of the ecosystem in Boston. And this is just how I assumed what happened. Techstars was like, wait, there's an opportunity there. And next thing you know, there's Techstars in Boston.
Yeah, it was actually, you can give credit to getting Techstars started in Boulder about a year after Y Combinator started. And Boston was the second city that they started running programs in. And that was because Bill Warner, a local tech entrepreneur, founded Avid, the nonlinear video editing company. He really, really wanted Techstars he wanted to stir up the Boston startup scene. So he convinced David Cohen, founder of Techstars, to run Boston-based programs. And we got to know David when Katie and I were running the Microsoft startup labs. We used our event space. We let them host demo day there. So we had gotten plugged into the Techstars organization just as being a generous kind of group working with them. And after Microsoft, which Microsoft at the time was a very different kind of culture, it's opened up quite a bit in the meantime. Katie and I left Microsoft after a couple of years, and she was, hey, why don't we love working with early stage teams and products. Why don't we try out becoming investors? So we did angel investing together, the two of us, for about a year, and then we started thinking of designing our own accelerator kind of workshops and coaching program. And we went to talk to David Cohen and said, hey, Boston's a big environment, certainly compared to Boulder. I think we're just as a courtesy, we want to tell you that we're going to start a different kind of accelerator, but we'll schedule it out of phase. Let's coordinate. And he's basically said, oh, the folks that are running the Boston program are going to do something different. If you're interested, why don't you take it on and try running Techstars as a way to get to know if that's something you want to do. So it was all very
Okay. I didn't know
collegial,
that.
kind of one relationship leads to another. And Katie and I ran 4 sessions of Techstars together, 2011 through 2014, I guess, 2013, 2014.
Okay. And so this was in the neighborhood of 60 plus companies, right?
Yeah, we had in the 4 sessions we did together, there were 52 companies.
Okay.
Some really great local successes. GrabCAD was bought by Stratasys a couple of years in for, I forget exactly how much, maybe 100 million. PillPack wound up being acquired by Amazon. That's a real anchor Boston company. And it was hard work. I just had lunch today with the Ben Carsio, who was one of the first CEOs, Promobox, in the program, and he hadn't realized. I said, yeah, in the early days, Katie and I, there was no salary. We didn't take any salary. We just sort of leaned in shoulder to shoulder with the startups, and it was kind of it was good. We borrowed office space. Microsoft had leased it but wasn't using it. So right in Kendall Square, they're like, yeah, you just pay for the cleaning and the electricity, and that wound up costing us like $7 a square foot for this office space in the heart of Kendall Square. So very lean, very scrappy days, and I think that translated to the way we worked with the young companies. Back then, we would give each company a stipend of $18,000, work with them really hard for 3 months, and we built up the community. Really pulled together a whole bunch of mentors, a whole bunch of individual angel investors, a lot of students, and we kind of grew over the four sessions. So demo day became a little bit out of scale. I think our biggest one, we had like 1,100 people in the audience watching 12 companies sort
But it
of
was
talk.
fun. It brought the community together. Like Demo Day at Textiles was like block that off the calendar. It was like a must attend event. It was so fun. And you already profiled some of the companies that you guys had run through the program then. I mean, they were great companies, great founders. And something that I learned that I never knew, and I think I just, ran into Katie at some event and we were talking of how much work the two of you put in to recruit these founders and
Yeah,
companies to Boston. I always thought as a managing director of Techstars, you just kick back and let the applications flow in and pick the best ones. But that
yeah.
wasn't what you did.
You're right. There definitely was an online application, and we would get, pick a number anywhere from 800 to more than 1,000 companies applying, teams applying. But you're right, we would actually be actively recruiting, trying to figure out who was out there. PillPack, for instance, we kind of convinced them to come into the program. So about half of each cohort, if was sort of hand to hand recruited by ourselves or by a small circle of people that we trusted.
So what were like the biggest lessons you learned? Because you were seeing so many companies that were, trying to become the next great whatever company. So what were some of the lessons
Yeah,
learned over
yeah,
that stretch?
we had to improvise and develop a whole bunch of different types of sessions, different kinds of workshops, and different formats of working with the groups. The strongest lesson was that the biggest successes and worst train wrecks were always due to kind of interpersonal issues among the founding team. They and we figured out how to scale kind of the lessons learned within a team to in this weird way. You could make that happen across a set of 12 companies. So when we were picking, we would try to think of the group as a group and say, okay, this company, there's something about them which seems that they're really, really they're a natural at selling and sales. People are going to learn from them. This company is incredibly, has a deep motivation that connects them to the outcome, and that kind of genuine, authentic spirit is going to really, if that can kind of spread around the whole set of 12 companies, that could be amazing. So we sort of designed the group, and then during the 3 months kind of push them in ways. A lot of the facilitating sessions was working with a company in front of the whole group, because when you're mentoring and trying to help people work through an issue, they can't always pop out of the context and see the meta lesson. But if the audience is watching you work with a set of founders about their issue, they can kind of say, "Oh, I see what's going on. There's another layer to this conversation that's happening." It's kind of an interesting. We later learned from educators. It's often called a master class. It's kind of like musicians working with the instructor in front of each other, or an art class where there's a critique, and then the other students are watching the educator with a student. It's even used in training, like marine mammals, like seals and whales, where a trainer works with an animal in front of the other animals, and then they kind of get the behavior and sort of learn to model the same behavior. So there are little things that we learned about working with groups. Huge amount of work, but we always felt like it's not like carrying a rock. It's like pushing a swing, where we're just the right impact at just the right time, kind of creates this really interesting momentum in these young companies.
Well, it's interesting that you talked about the founder conflict because I don't know why, but all of a sudden in some of these recent episodes of this podcast, talking to investors and like, what's the biggest challenge for portfolio companies? And that's been the one that's come up like consistently lately. I don't know. I'm just like,
Yeah.
wow. Like, is that like the number one reason that most startups fail? Is it that founder
Yeah,
conflict?
it's really it's a pattern that can get destructive and these negative spiral really quickly. I mean, startups are hard, very intense, and you kind of have these highs and lows. So the team dynamics get dicey.
Are you like I've heard some investors are opposed to, having a single founder company. They want co-founders or, at least two or three. Is like, what's your viewpoint on that?
Yeah, we definitely have a bias against solo founders. Not
Mhm.
a universal rule. At the Engine, I'm working with a company called Hyperlight. It's a photonics technology out of Harvard. And that was a solo founder. That company's come along really, really well. They're about 30 employees now, maybe 5 or 6 years into their journey. But if you get the right mix, people kind of, we would always, when we're getting to know a team, we would often ask, who's the gas and who's the brakes, who's like, okay, go, let's just do it. And who's like, well, hang on a second, let's think it through. So you want these additive, um, uh, multi, the co-founders, if you get the right mix, can be really powerful together.
If you're a founder looking for a co-founder, like what advice would you have on figuring out that mix of being able to work together effectively? Because before you start doing it, it's kind of hard to,
It is
you
hard.
know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think the best ones are where you've naturally worked together. You either met as colleagues, or you did a bunch of projects in when you were in school together, or just on side projects. The You kind of have to really, to me, really successful founders are often this weird paradox where they're incredibly stubborn and tenacious, and they really believe in something, an approach or a concept, but at the same time they're incredibly flexible, and they're really good listeners, and they can kind of tease apart real world, what's happening in the real world, and then change their mind. So that's a tough combination, to be incredibly stubborn and incredibly flexible. So with your co-founder, you're going to have to be a really good listener, and you're not always going to be the one who's right, and you got to figure it out together. So it is something that's hard to tell what the chemistry will be like without working together on something.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's fast forward to what you're up to today. We've already been talking about a little bit here, but the engine. So the Engine Ventures. So how did that all come together?
Sure. We Katie and I and a third friend, Bob Mason, after Techstars, we had raised a small venture fund called Project 11. And we had finished investing out of the first fund, and we're starting to think and plan for the second fund. And this is about 7 years ago. And one of Katie's mentors over the years has been David Fialco, one of the founders of General Catalyst. And she was talking to him for advice about fundraising, our second fund. And as I heard it from her, at the time he was advising MIT about a concept to take friction out of the path of kind of science and engineering based startups. And he suggested to Katie that it could be a really interesting platform for her. It was something that Katie was open to giving them MIT advice about. Okay, what would you think about if you're trying to make it faster and easier for science, and especially companies that are trying to make the world a better place through technology. And MIT was thinking about two things. One is specialized infrastructure, co-working facilities, lab space that you could rent, by the month without having to build it out and take the time it takes to build out a bio lab or chemistry lab or machine shop is not helpful for young companies. And access to capital. So they were, and Katie was, very much is like, I hear that you're looking to stand up two businesses with two leaders. It might make more sense in the early days to have it just be all one thing that can co-evolve, because there's a lot of experimentation and thinking about the structure and approach that will, you don't know until you get into it. So one thing led to another. MIT tapped Katie to be the founding CEO and managing director of the Engine, as it was called at the time, which she raised with MIT a venture capital fund. They had already leased space in Central Square at the time, and started outfitting about maybe 30,000 square feet of co-working space. 7 years later, the co-working side, last summer, it was just in the Globe the other day, both sides, Engine Ventures on the venture capital side and the Engine Accelerator on the infrastructure and services and space side, grew much more rapidly than even we had expected or hoped for. And so the two companies are now independent. Emily Knight, who was our COO, is president of the Engine Accelerator, the infrastructure side. The Kendall Square, 750 Main Street, has about 1,000 people working in it. We still have the Mass Ave Central Square location, and the venture fund is now, we've made 55 investments, if I count right, over the last 7 years. It's fun. It's really fun.
I had no idea there was 1,000 people working out of
And they're
that
not
side of the
all,
business.
only half of them are in portfolio companies that the fund is invested in. So it's a general interdisciplinary, shared space, private space, shared facilities, kind of. The building is an old Polaroid factory, so it's kind of zoned for industrial use. It's got loading docks, and you can have a lift truck, and sort of carry things around. And the machine shop, it's zoned so that we can have welding, and we've got all kinds of better facilities than the Central Square location.
And these are all, hard tech, or what you call, or the websites, you call it tough tech.
Yeah.
So, these are not, hey, we're building a web app for photo sharing companies. These are all like deep science, game, world-changing ideas.
A lot of them have some kind of physical science and engineering. We cover, MIT asked us to look for things that have some true technical breakthrough at the heart, could become enormous businesses and make the world a better place in some way. So they gave us a lane, but it's a pretty wide lane. So a bunch of biology, kind of cell therapy, manufacturing, bunch of energy, power generation, commercial fusion power, energy storage, a bunch of new materials for manufacturing different types of membranes. Pretty interesting, mostly Boston based. Out of 55 companies, I think only 7 of them are outside the Boston, New England area. But some of them are like science fiction. When my friends ask, say, hey, so what are you doing lately? It's like, oh, we invested in a company out of New Haven, Bexorg, that has invented a way to keep brains alive outside the body for days or weeks.
That's fantastic.
And it's for research. You can see how a drug kind of crosses the so-called blood-brain barrier, and every 10 minutes you can take samples and see where it winds up in what dilution in a living. There's no neural activity, but it's cellularly alive and functioning as a whole brain.
No neural activity yet.
Yeah,
That's next.
First paper was like, we took this brain out of a pig, we brought it back to life. We were standing by with an anesthetic just in case neural activity started up.
All right. So what's an example of one of the portfolio companies that, fall under your investment portfolio?
Yeah, I tend to take a lot of the early ones, and some of the ones that involve semiconductors or compute. My background is in software, obviously. Let's see which one. I mentioned Hyperlight. They invented an optical photonic process using a material called lithium niobate. And it's their customers are doing telecom transceivers for telecom, datacom, sort of moving data across networks, but also it's used for test measurement and equipment. They have a bunch of very high precision modulators, and they have chipsets that they've designed for datacom, telecom that are being designed into sort of equipment like switches that would go into racks. They have custom work. They're doing work with customers, including quantum computing companies that need specialized devices designed. So it's a solid business. They've tripled revenues in each of the last 3 years. They're kind of if they wanted to, they could be cash flow positive next year. When we got involved, it was, as I said, one scientist. We wrote him a $2.5 million check to get started. It'll fundamentally lower the cost and lower the energy usage for a lot of things that data centers use and that telecom networks use.
And another one of your portfolio companies actually went public through a SPAC, right? Or a engine portfolio company, Zapata.
Yeah, that's it's actually a software company called Zapata. They've changed their name to Zapata AI. Came out of Harvard, initially quantum algorithms, and then they realized that the quantum algorithms could be used for machine learning and improvements in AI. So they've kind of tilted to that. One of their early customers is Andretti Racing, and they use the algorithms to manage almost like synthetic data. So they take real sensor data during a race, and then they compute in real time kind of the interface between tires and the racetrack. They announced that they were going to de-SPAC, merge with actually Andretti family, Mario and Michael Andretti family, public SPAC. And then 2 days ago, I think they put out a press release that they were going to have it's called a public general shareholders meeting on February 13th and list Zapata as a public company soon after that.
Very cool. Yeah, like that's like I've seen some of the videos of what they do with racing, and it's just there's so much data that goes into the success because every second counts in a race like that at that speed. So it's just fascinating to see how quantum computing is participating in that.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the things that I think a lot of entrepreneurs, universities even struggle with is how do you commercialize IP, right? So like, what advice would you have in terms of, if you've got this great idea you've developed within the university system, but how do you roll it out to, build it into a standalone company?
Yeah, as a startup, an entrepreneurial route is interesting because there are different kind of playbooks than you normally read about or you typically learn about in entrepreneurship classes on campus. And a couple simple examples. A lot of times, the entrepreneurship model that people talk about is kind of the Silicon Valley lean startup, where you have a minimum viable product and you pivot until you get product market fit. Some of these companies that we're working with, there, for instance, one called Sublime that's got a new chemical process that will help them manufacture carbon neutral cement. There's no question of product market fit. Do people buy cement? Yeah, they buy a lot of cement. But there are a lot of questions about can you make the process economically, at parity? Okay, there are regulations. You can't just start selling cement to build bridges. It has to be kind of certified, and there's different grades. So yeah, you kind of have to get through the regulatory maze. And then the industries are old and very complicated to sort of how do you break into the kind of industry where to be successful, you're going to have to be producing, hundreds and hundreds of millions of metric tons of material all around the world. So the playbook of the lean startup MVP doesn't really fit that. The other interesting thing is a lot of times if you were in a business school and talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, it's very common to say, don't try to start with a solution. You really have to understand what the problem is, what the world of the customer, kind of how they assign value to different things. But a bunch of the companies that we work with came out of academic research where their scientific work led to some kind of new process or material. So, hey, we've invented a new chemistry for membranes that have very different characteristics than people have ever been able to make before. And then they are starting with a solution. And then the playbook for them is they say, okay, what industry uses membranes for separating liquids? Okay, dairy, pulp and paper. Okay, which one? They sort of have to do this whole analysis and set of conversations to pick an initial market, and then they have to make that playbook for those kind of platform companies is, do you want to be a platform or you just want to focus on one application area? But then super simplify it, that university IP, you still need a team that's going to go full time with it. Tenured professors who lead a lab, they might be a co-founder, but they're very, very rarely would they give up their position to become a full-time co-founder. So you have to find the right kind of team, just like any startup.
Right. So as you're evaluating ideas or companies for making an investment, like what do you tend to look for? Like what makes you say yes or no?
Yeah, we have to believe the team has kind of the grit and the will stick to it. A lot of these companies might take longer to reach market and to develop their products than a software company, for instance. So we have to believe that the team really cares about having a broad impact in the world. And we also have to believe that it could be a really good business. Luckily, some of the industries, if you fusion power, the huge growth curve and demand for electric energy. So some of these industries, by their nature, are enormous if these companies can make it through. And we have to be able to we work with so many different types of science and technologies that we have to be able to diligence and kind of build a network that we can kind of figure out, okay, there's a whole bunch of different people working on carbon neutral cement. How is this company's approach different and better than what other people are doing?
Right. So broadly speaking, because I know you're in a subset of the ecosystem, but broadly speaking, like what's the state of the Boston tech ecosystem? Like we've done like a walk down like memory lane of different,
Yeah.
transition of technology and what that's meant for Boston building companies. So who's the next generation, the next PillPacks, the next DraftKings,
Yeah.
Wayfarers?
Yeah. I mean, Boston is, I think, one of its strengths and also one of its weaknesses when it comes to kind of storytelling around startups is that it covers a lot of diverse territory. I mean, if you look, at any given year, the activity around robotics, has been consistent. Going back to the '80s and iRobot now and Boston Dynamics and Amazon Robotics, old Kiva system, Six River system. So there's a whole, what was I seeing in the news? It's kind of like what do they call those aerial rivers? There's a whole set of activity across robotics, different kinds of biotech, gene editing, pharmaceuticals. In the software world, has turned over a number of times over the years from enterprise software, personal computer software, a bunch of, a small number of consumer facing web, Monster, Kayak, TripAdvisor. So Boston is a layer cake, and it's hard to point to kind of a huge dominant uh, like social networking or mobile. They're these massive waves that Boston mostly missed. You could say Facebook started here, but it certainly didn't build out here. I think one thing, at least for the kinds of stuff the engine is doing, the kind of people we talk to, I'm really encouraged that a lot of people early in career who are going into entrepreneurship are thinking about, is this good? Is it a mission that I'm going to be giving up however many years to try to make this work, whether you're an employee or a founder? Am I doing something that I feel proud of? Versus just sort of saying, oh, what's the quickest way to get people to buy more stuff? internet advertising or data gathering and on people and their behaviors and how to do more with that. So more and more I see and even not just early in career, but I've had a lot of people come through our doors where they're later in their career and they want to transition to do something positive, world positive. We have a person that is an executive in resident who was very senior at Mass Mutual, and then studied up and is like, I want to get into the climate space as a CEO. So has been working with us to look at a bunch of companies around hydrogen and kind of energy. So the transition to look for something that I can be proud of, when you're whatever the big challenges are in the world today, that your grandkids ask you, what did you do when you could have done something that made a difference? So I think that's a very positive thing.
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, you mentioned climate tech, clean tech, and it's like, yeah, I mean, you look at like Brian Halligan,
Yeah,
CEO and founder of HubSpot, what he's doing with Propeller
propeller.
Ventures,
Yeah,
Jason Jacobs, what he's doing, like becoming like the
yeah,
poster child of I mean, he's like the, you know,
yeah,
spokesperson with his podcast for the whole climate
yeah. My climate
world.
journey.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting. What about AI? And like you would think Boston would be poised to have a
Yeah,
real
that's interesting.
impact.
We've been, like many venture firms, trying to stay as close as we can to what's happening. We have a Harvard PhD student part-time who works with us on tracking a lot of the academic work. I mean, there's a fairly deep set of work at MIT and Harvard on the academic side. I don't see the depth of the core innovation. I mean, there was a head start with Google, the DeepMind, and OpenAI. They've been around for actually quite a number of years. Um, the talent, I mean, I don't see Boston or Cambridge, as kind of a deep entrepreneurial center for AI. There's a bunch of it happening. For us as an investor, we track it and we look at it, and almost all the companies we've invested in are using some of the modern AI techniques. Even for things like modeling and simulation of physical environments. Um, it's changing. The landscape is changing so fast that some of my friends who are actively software investing are like, I don't know if I should I need to back off a little bit because it's just moving so fast.
Yeah, it's got to be a challenge as an investor, that's for sure. It's because yeah, the speed of what's moving and some of the massive rounds of capital that are going towards some of these companies to build what they're building is just
Yeah,
extraordinary. So it'd be
yeah,
hard to
and
be a
we've
smaller
invested
fund to
in
compete.
um, hardware technologies that would reduce the cost of training and inference. So Celestial AI, it's a West Coast company, is doing semiconductor design in that market. So we do look for some of the lower layers. Paul English, founder of Kayak and others, had a fun tweet when people were saying, "Oh, a lot of these AI companies are just wrappers around something. How can that be valuable?" And he's like, "Nothing wrong with being a wrapper. ITA was bought by Google for 700 and whatever $1 million. Kayak was a wrapper around ITA, and it sold for a lot more than that." so, so that was funny.
All right, here's a little fun fact that I saw about you too. So going back again in your history. So co-instructor of graduate course 6.932 linked data ventures with Professor Sir Tim Berners-Lee. Like, so
Yeah.
what was it like being a co-instructor of a graduate course with the founder of the internet?
It was fun. It was fun. I mean, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, he's a super nice guy. Um, he's a um, when I came out of Microsoft, Bill Aulet, who's head of the Martin Trust Center of Entrepreneurship at MIT, was like the second person to call me. He's like, "Hey, you probably have some free time on your hands," and so I began helping um, Bill's organization at MIT, kind of with different types of workshops and mentoring. And he asked us, he said, "Hey, in the MIT has this January intersession called IAP." Said Tim Berners-Lee taught a workshop about semantic web technology last year. It went okay, but he had hoped that people would actually develop some tools, actually write some software around that technology rather than just learn it. Could you and Katie help him design something that might be more project oriented? So we did like a 3 or 4 week class where we had the team, we forced them to form teams. We guided them towards product ideation about some kind of software thing that would actually be useful in the semantic web for people working in that field, or would be an interesting demonstration of its capabilities. And it went really well. I mean, even in the small 3 or 4 week class, a company was formed out of it. A bunch of open source tools were put out. And so Tim asked if we would help design a 4 credit full semester class, which we did, and we taught it with Tim and Lalana Kegel, one of the associate professors in his group at the time. It was the first class. Tim had been at MIT for quite a while with his the World Wide Web Consortium, but this was the first class that he'd ever taught at MIT. So it was really interesting. It got a fair amount of attention up and down the administration. The funny thing was, a bunch of companies were formed out of the first time we taught it. There's a company that came out called Loku that was bought a few years later for $89 million. Like
I remember them.
Yeah. It was a project-based class. MIT at the time, I don't know if they do have one now, doesn't really have a software engineering kind of product design and product architecture class. So Tim and his professor taught the semantic web technologies. And then Katie and I taught kind of product thinking, and I did some sort of engineering, sort of application level, kind of, okay, how do you put it all together? And we forced everybody in the class that was graduate students, 2/3 out of the computer science department, 1/3 out of Sloan, because we wanted some business thinking in the projects. We forced everybody to learn all of the technology, do all of the homework, write the code and problem sets. And then we had them all brainstorm potentially successful products and form a team, and then actually code a prototype and present out at the end. The funniest part was, universally, we ran it 4 times for credit. It became harder and harder to get the right mix of students. The business schools, Sloan students would say, "Oh my God, this is the hardest class of the whole 2 years I'm here." And then the computer science students would be, I wish there was a little bit more technical content. So it was hard to get the right level of participation. But Tim's a great guy. He very, all kinds of funny stories he's talking about. He was, when the Olympics were in the UK, because he's a British citizen and a knight, he was part of the opening ceremonies. Kind of, they had an old computer with a floodlight inside shining out onto his face. So he would tell all these sort of behind the scenes stories about how funny it felt to be a kind of a, he said, yeah, I mean, if I'm in a glass conference room and a bunch of visitors to campus come, they all pull out their phones and start taking pictures of me.
That's awesome. All right, 3 apps you can't live without.
I'm pretty boring with that. It's utilitarian. I definitely am a sucker for the Twitter X and the more modern federated Blue Sky, kind of interesting API driven feed. I'm an information sponge, and so with Twitter, every 6 months or so, I would kind of find another, if you think of it as a filter bubble, I would find another bubble and try to plug myself in. Whether it's kind of female scientists or Black social activists, I would try to kind of get in the middle of another bubble, because a lot of media obviously is not wide ranging. I'm a connect the dots person, so I need a lot of dots, whether it's in my engine job or day to day. So Twitter, Blue Sky, and then it's all just functional. I try everything, but I haven't really gotten, I'm not picky about which email client or, I have all the messaging apps. I have a few people on WhatsApp, a few people on Messenger, and a lot of people on just iMessage. But I don't know.
All right, how about podcast or book recommendation for all entrepreneurs?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I don't, I'm, to be honest, I'm not really a podcast. I don't have the kind of time in my day to that where that fits in conveniently. Books,
Mhm.
if it's books that help you think about startups, definitely Venture Deals, Brad Feld. It really dissects term sheets and kind of why these terms came into being. Um, there's a great one, a professor out of Harvard called Founders Dilemmas. It's very data driven, but also a lot of anecdotes. Chapter 6 is the one we tell people. Chapter 6 of Founders Dilemmas. You're thinking about how to divide up equity across founders. You know, you should read that and think about why that could make sense. Um, if you're interested in kind of the history of technology and capitalism, there's a book of essays by Carlotta Perez. She's an economist, economic historian, and she goes through this. I forget the exact title. Is something about bubbles and golden ages, and but Carlotta Perez, and she goes through all the way back to things, whether it was canals, the telegraph, railroad, the internet. These fundamental technological breakthroughs attract over investment of speculative financial investment, and that always washes out, but then often you're left with something of high value. So if you think of the web and the dot-com days, well, aren't we all glad we've got uh, today's internet and all the things it lets us do? So that's a really interesting read. There's a similar book, a little bit longer, called Doing Capitalism by William Janeway. It's got a lot of the other sort of economics and finance and technology kind of all mixed together. Um, and I'm a did we talked about Oppenheimer the last time? Yeah.
Yeah, we did. We
I'm
totally did.
yeah. So that's an area of history that if you're interested in that, The Making of the Atomic Bomb by Rhodes is a good read. And if you have the time and that's your kind of thing, you should definitely find a time to visit the Trinity site where they set off the first atomic bomb. It's open to the public. It used to be twice a year. I think it may be only once a year right now. But it's an excuse to read up on the history, and it's a really strange combination of science, engineering, politics. Um, so
Yeah, well, those are great suggestions. And Oppenheimer, yeah, like the obviously everyone loved the movie. I haven't seen it yet. I need to see it, so I will be checking it out soon.
yeah.
Uh, so what do you like to do for fun outside of work?
I'm into cars.
Hmm, I didn't know
And
that.
I have too many cars, but I think it's okay for climate because I'm only ever driving one at a time. Um, the most recent odd car. Well, I got into it when I was at the little company that was bought by Lotus. There was a small financial windfall, and we, as a family, we used it to move to Lexington from Arlington. A better school system for our son who's 5. And my wife was like, "Hey, you're driving an 8-year-old Toyota that your dad gave you. Why don't you buy a new car?" So I started looking around. At that time, I was thinking of maybe a VW GTI or something like that. But I was looking. This was long ago, when the classifieds in the paper where you look for used cars. And I was like, "Hey, this has been carving the ads for the last few weeks. Do you mind if I keep driving the Toyota for a while and buy an old car?" And I bought a 1965 Aston Martin DB5, the gold
Wow.
car. Totally beat up. They needed a ton of work, which I never did. And turned out the guy selling it hadn't even listed it this way, but it had the high performance Vantage engine, and it was left-hand drive, and it they made about 1,000 DB5s, Aston Martin at the time. They only made 65 with the Vantage engine and only 11 that had left-hand drive. And so somehow I had bought this crazy rare car.
What's
And
left-hand drive? What does that even
yeah,
mean?
yeah, it's in Britain, when you drive on the wrong side of the road, the steering is on the right hand side. So the
I see
U.S.
what you mean.
market, they have
Got
to
it.
put the steering in the left side. Yeah, and I sold it after a couple of years because the market went crazy, and I bought it for $10,750, and I sold it for $90,000 2 years later.
What?
And someone a year ago emailed me from Munich and said, "Hey, my friend has your old car," and he had pictures of it. It was completely restored,
No
just
way.
perfect. I have a website and it lists the chassis number, chassis 1810/L. And he said, "Hey, my friend has your old car. Do you have any more pictures of it?"
That's so
So
cool.
I'm a car guy.
Very, very cool. Well, Reed, I could, talk to you for hours and upon hours about all these stories. So, I want to thank you for taking the time because we had to do two sessions here because there was so much great storytelling to be told. But thank you for, sharing all the stories, all the great companies that you've been a part of, whether it's building in them direct or as an investor, and everything you do for the ecosystem in general.
Cool. Happy to be here, Keith. I think I have high hopes for Boston and succeeding generations of entrepreneurs that will come through.